Welcome to tonight's web class. Tonight, we will be talking about personal boundaries, what they are, and how they can help make your life better. I'm Keisha Golder, and I help women define their unique purpose so they can live a life they created on their terms. I also created the Your Life Purpose Makeover Journey, which is a 3-stage, 9-step program developed to help you change your life. But we'll talk more about that later. I would like to remind everyone that there will be a section towards the end of the presentation. So if you can hold your questions until then, it will be greatly appreciated. Before we jump into tonight's topic, let's do a quick recap of what we learned last week. Last week was all about personal identity, what it is, what makes up each person's personal identity, and how personal identity impacts our lives. This week, we are talking about boundaries, what they are, why we need to set boundaries, and how boundaries help us align with our purpose. Let's jump right on in. What are boundaries? Boundaries are guidelines that you establish to tell other people how to behave around you. The easiest way for me to define boundaries so that everyone can understand is, as children, when we were playing with someone, either at the beach or at home, and someone was getting on our nerves and not listening to us or not playing the way we wanted to play with them, we would say that we're drawing a line in the sand or across the room, whether it was a real line or an imaginary line. And we would say, if you aren't going to play nice, you cannot come across this line. Whether we knew it or not, we were establishing boundaries for ourselves. There are 7 types of boundaries. These are physical, sexual, emotional/mental, spiritual/religious, financial and material, time, and non-negotiables. Boundaries, regardless of the type, always have to do with physical contact, verbal interactions, and of course, your personal space. Physical boundaries are all about protecting your space and your body, and of course, being able to be sure that your physical needs are met. How many of us do not like for people to get too close? I'm quite sure a lot of you are raising your hands as well. How does it make you feel when people get too close? For me, I get anxious. I feel like, why is this person on my back? Why do they feel the need to be so close to me? Especially if it's not someone who lives in my household or someone that I'm close to. And even then, sometimes I just want to be in my personal space by myself. So, like I said, if you're anything like me, you feel uncomfortable and you get the urge to move away from the person. So, with this pandemic that we've been dealing with, I am so grateful for the 6 feet social distancing, because that meant for me that no one was able to get close within 6 feet of me and invade my personal space. Now, I know that's not the norm, but didn't it feel good when you didn't have to worry about someone getting too close to you, even though everybody didn't follow the rule? But it felt good knowing that that rule was in place. And even to say to somebody, remember social distancing, we need to stay 6 feet apart. That felt good. That made me feel like, yes, someone finally gets it. I don't want to be so close to someone else. The next type of boundary, which is sexual, has to deal with your right to consent, your right to ask for exactly what it is that you want, and the right for you to be honest with someone else and for them to be honest with you about your sexual past. Now, I know a lot of things regarding sex are taboo, but in this aspect, it's good to talk about sexual boundaries because there are so many instances of sexual abuse and things like that that people need to know that they have a right to sexual boundaries. I know that I've heard growing up and even as an adult where there were instances where a young lady may have been with her boyfriend, husband, whoever, and he continuously asked her for sex. And she became so frustrated and worn down that she agreed to it even though she did not want to. In a moment like that, even though she agreed, it was agreement through coercion because he coerced her through wearing her down. So her sexual boundary was crossed. Even if she had not established it, that boundary was still crossed because it's her right to refuse if she wants to. With emotional and mental boundaries, those protect the right to have feelings and thoughts, and to not have someone ridicule you or criticize how you're feeling or what you're thinking. How many times have you expressed your feelings to a friend, a family member, and they dismissed your feelings because it didn't align with what they were feeling? Or how many times have you been told that you didn't actually feel what you stated you felt? I know sometimes we think children don't have feelings, or some of us think that children don't have feelings. But if a child comes to you and tells you, hey, I think I'm depressed, do not violate their boundary by saying, you're not depressed, you're just whatever. Listen to your child. Establish that they have their own feelings, their own emotions, and their own thoughts. And they don't always have to align with what you think. And that they are able to voice those feelings and thoughts without being criticized for them. The fourth type of boundary is spiritual religious. And this is the right to protect what we believe in and what we worship. We've all had instances, probably some of us more than others, where we've been pressured to go to church because other family members felt that it was better for us to go to church, even though we believed or we worshiped how we felt was best for us. I can tell you, when I started my spiritual journey about 10, 11 years ago, I did not tell anyone. The reason I did not tell anyone was because my grandfather is a very religious Christian man. My aunt, my cousins, everyone is very religious. They go to church every Sunday, Bible study, all of that. My grandmother is Catholic. So immediately when they found out, and I believe they found out because I told them I did not celebrate Christmas anymore. Regardless of all the information I gave them about my reasoning for not celebrating Christmas, I was told that I didn't believe in God, when that was something that never came out of my mouth. So, and I'm not going to say they made me feel, I allowed them to make me feel a certain way about my spiritual journey, not realizing that I was able to place a boundary there. So the spiritual religious boundaries just protect us to be able to feel however we feel religiously or spiritually, and to worship however we want to worship without being criticized by anybody, without feeling pressured to conform to the norm. The fifth type of boundaries are financial and material. That's literally just protecting the right to be able to use your financial resources and your possessions as you want. My example for this is, how many of you have given a charger to someone who needed it in that moment and you weren't using it? How many times have they asked you when you needed your charger back, when you asked for your charger back, how many times were you asked what percentage is your phone on? Mind you, it's not their charger. You lent your charger to them, but they're asking you what percentage your phone is on before they give you your charger back, because they feel that they have the right to it because you lent it to them. Or how many times have you been shopping with somebody and you've seen this pair of shoes that you've wanted so many times? You know how much it costs. You know what outfit you're going to wear with it. You've even saved the money up for it. But the person you're with says, I don't like those. They cost too much. How about you get those? Or get these other shoes? They're telling you what you should do with your money that you've earned and you've worked for. Boundaries put in place for financial and material allow us to tell people, it's my money, or these are my things, and I'm going to do with them what I choose. The next type of boundary is major, and it's time. Time is something you can't get back, and time boundaries protect us in knowing that we can spend our time however we like. For me, I'm a person that I try to always be early. Whether it's 5 or 10 minutes, I try to be early. Now, if you're a person who's always late and you feel as if I'm going to wait for you regardless how late you are, you're violating my boundaries of time. Because I'm not counting the 10 minutes early that I am against you. I'm counting those 10, 15 minutes that you're late without a phone call, without a text message saying, hey, I apologize, I'm stuck in traffic, I'm late, or anything like that. For you to just be late and not care is a violation of the time boundary. And the last type of boundary is the non-negotiables. These are basically just simply the things that we need to feel safe in our life. An example for this one is, if you have been raised in a household where there was drugs and alcohol every day of your life, and when you became an adult, you said, I don't want to be around that. Whether you said that to someone else or not, but they know your situation that you grew up in, and people continuously bring that drugs and alcohol around you, they're violating your boundary of your need to feel safe, your non-negotiables. Everyone is going to have different boundaries because all of us are different and all of us experience things differently. But we all need to establish these boundaries. So now that we know what boundaries are and the types of boundaries, why do we need to set boundaries? Boundaries create trust. They build healthy relationships, and they create safety in a relationship. So when we are able to build relationships where we can trust each other, we feel safe, and we have healthy and healing relationships. So you're probably saying, well, how can boundaries create trust? If a person is able to hear what your boundaries are when you speak them and respect them, and respecting them means that they don't break them, then you know that you can trust that person. And I'm not saying go out just because they respect your boundaries and pour 100% of your trust. Of course, trust is earned as well. But in this instant, that is how you can create trust with someone. The same goes for you. If someone tells you what their boundaries are, and you intentionally live with remembering what their boundaries are so that you don't cross them, because you know crossing them is going to hurt them or cause them some type of pain, then you are creating, that person knows that they can trust you, just like you know that you can trust them. Everyone's not going to be able to voice their boundaries to you. And just because they do not voice their boundaries to you does not mean that the boundaries don't exist. But a major part of the importance of boundaries is being able to communicate them and communicate them effectively. See, communication goes two ways. It is speaking what it is that you want the other person to receive, hear, and understand and implement, as well as being able to hear, receive, understand, and implement it. So if a person tells you, this is my boundary, they don't have to tell you why it's their boundary, but they're telling you that it's your boundary. And you hear them tell you that this thing is their boundary, but you don't understand it, and you don't make a choice to respect that boundary, then you're not creating trust and you're not building healthy relationships. Healthy relationships are to help each person grow. And I'm not just talking sometimes when we say relationships, we think of just intimate relationships. No, I'm talking about all types of relationships, partnerships, business relationships, friendships, any type of shit. These are important in those things. So if someone does not respect your boundaries, you can't trust them, and you know that they're not going to respect you. We have to be able to express ourselves. And expressing ourselves tells people how we feel. So the practice of setting boundaries allows you to communicate. It allows you to communicate your needs and your desires, which allows another person to be able to accept them. And if they don't, they're free to walk away. And if they do, they're able to continue building upon this foundation that you're setting. And while they're building the trust and the healthy relationship, they are also creating safety for you, because you know that this person takes what you're saying to heart, and they're going to try to protect you from experiencing the negative side of not having that boundary. So most of us have not been taught how to set boundaries as children, because a lot of times, and I know most of us have heard the saying, children are to be seen and not heard. As children, there are some of us that were made to hug family members that we did not feel comfortable hugging, because we weren't allowed to, we did not know that they were boundaries, but we weren't allowed to express that. So that meant that our personal boundaries weren't being met by our parents, because they didn't think anything of it. They considered it being rude, or you're only going to see this person once a year, just hug them this one time. Not understanding that you had a reason, whether you were able to communicate it or not, that you did not want to hug this person or be close to this person. So in order to now, as adults, young adults, older adults, to reset the boundaries or to set the boundaries that were never set, how do we do that? We're going to have to self-reflect. We're going to have to think about all of the times where we were unhappy and hurt in situations. What were the things that made us unhappy or hurt? How did we allow someone to cross one of those types of boundaries in those situations? What could we have said to make those situations different, where our boundaries were respected and our boundaries were taken into consideration and our boundaries were met? Another way to reset your boundaries is by the 5 things method. This is where you write down 5 things you want people to stop doing around you, 5 things you want people to stop saying around you, and 5 things that you want people to stop telling you. So, for this example, I'm just going to give like one of each thing. So, you may want people to stop talking about other people around you. That's one thing that you want people to stop doing around you. One thing that you may want people to stop saying around you is, you're cute for a big girl. Another thing that you may want people to stop around you is telling you that you're invalid. These are all things that you can identify that has happened to you. And if they've happened to you, how can you change it? Put those into a boundary, put those into a category, and tell people, I no longer want to hear your conversations that you've had with other people and how you feel about them. Especially if you aren't able to tell them the things that you're telling me. That person has one or two options. They either respect the boundary that you set or they cross the boundary. Now, if someone is going to cross that boundary, there are a couple things that you can do. You can either give them another chance. And this is important, especially if you have not had boundaries set and you're setting them, because sometimes, yes, people genuinely forget. But you know when someone is forgetting, and you know when someone is just saying, I don't care how you feel, I'm going to do what I want to do. And then you have the option to continue to allow your boundaries to be violated or leave that person alone until they can learn to respect your boundaries. We talked about what boundaries are. We talked about why we need to set boundaries. Now, how can boundaries help us align with our purpose? Gives us less distractions. Boundaries gives us less distractions. Boundaries allow you to align more with your values. Once you set your boundaries, you are clear to focus on yourself and your goals. You do not have to worry about walking on eggshells around people, or you do not have to constantly worry about, what if this person does this to me? Or what if this person says this? Or what if my not establishing boundaries has allowed this person to make me feel a certain way? You have the boundaries. So you're not thinking these things. So you're more focused on what it is you want to accomplish, how you want to live your life, the things that you want to do. You have more time to focus on them. How often have you been sidetracked or distracted at the hands of someone else? Because you haven't had time or had the knowledge to set boundaries. For me, as someone who hasn't set boundaries until my adulthood, my more recent adulthood, I was always distracted by someone else. Because there were no boundaries put in place. There was nothing to say, I'm focusing on this. So while I'm focusing on this, don't bother me, don't call me, don't text me, because you're not going to get a response. I am focused on this thing. This thing is important to me, and that's what I'm focusing on. You become more aligned with your values. You're able to not be distracted or clouded by what everyone else feels, thinks, and does. You can really begin to reevaluate your values. First, identify your values, reevaluate them, see how they align with where you want to go, with your purpose. And then if they don't, figure out what values do align with them and how you can make sure that everything is on the same path. Boundaries help us far more than we'd like to believe, because most of us have spent so much of our lives avoiding boundaries. One, because we didn't know what they were, and two, because we didn't know how to implement them. Our lives are going to be so much better when we know what boundaries are, when we are able to say, I don't like the fact that you share everything that you know about me with someone that I'm not friends with. That will end, like I said, in one of two ways. They're either going to respect that or they're not. And if they're not going to respect that, in order for us to follow our purpose and for us to grow and be less distracted, we can walk away. We always have that option when our boundaries are violated to walk away. So we've discussed all of the things about boundaries, what they are, the types of boundaries, why we need to set them, and how boundaries align us with our purpose. Now is the time for you to ask questions if you have any. You can type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question that you have. Okay, so I love to stay connected with everyone who comes to my weekly class. Here's how you can find me. You can find me on Facebook at Coach Keisha Golder. You can find me on YouTube at Keisha Golder, LinkedIn, Keisha Golder, and of course, feel free to check out my website, KeishaGolder.com, where you can find blog posts, videos, as well as previous web classes. My next web class, we are going to talk about why personal power is important. You're going to want to come to that one. Here is my roadmap again, the Life Purpose Makeover Journey, 3-stage, 9-step program where we work together to figure out where you are, where you want to go, what values you have, how those values align or line up with where you want to go, what your beliefs are, how your beliefs and values match to help you get to where you want to go, what your skills and talents are, as well as your passions and interests, because they all fit together, how your life experiences have affected your views on things, and how your life experiences can help you fulfill your life purpose or determine your life purpose. Then we get into the nitty-gritty of where I work with you to create the vision of the life that you want, that life that's on your own terms, that no one else has a say in. What it looks like, what it smells like, who's there, what you're doing, what you're wearing, more importantly, what you feel. And then, of course, we are going to define your purpose, what your purpose is, how you can fulfill your purpose. And we're going to create the blueprint. So it not only works for this purpose, if you feel that you have another or you come across another purpose in your life, that blueprint is going to allow you to follow the steps to make that purpose a reality as well. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.